if you told me yesterday that the NHL would be canceling games as well, I would have said, no way. There's no way. For a bunch of different reasons. Not to say that these NHL guys are bad dudes. Not to say that they don't care about the cause, because they do. But there's not. Let's just be honest here. There's not a lot of minorities that play in the NHL. Very few black players in the NHL. Does that mean these players don't care? That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is you would think that it would happen in sports where there's more African Americans. I don't think I'm out of line in saying that.
Well, you're saying that.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Mr. McCloskey.
It's more likely to happen in sports where the players are directly impacted, even though these players aren't directly impacted either.
That is completely not true what you just said. Hold on a second. You are assuming. Hold on.
No, I'm saying that
you are assuming that
how is LeBron James directly impacted?
Okay, first of all,
by Jacob Blake.
Okay, so first of all,
getting shot 7 times.
First of all, I will go to a Republican. Maybe you'll understand if I talk about a Republican in Congressman Scott. Okay?
Okay.
Congressman Scott is somebody that is very well off, that has a lot of money, that lives in a nice neighborhood. Scott is the one who said not that long ago that he was pulled over 10 times in the last year for none other reason than he is black. So the idea that just because you have a lot of money and you're a prominent person like a LeBron James does not mean that you can never be a victim of racism or police brutality. So I completely disagree with what you just said.
I didn't say that, Brian.
You're saying how is it impacted? Isn't that what you just said? How does it impact LeBron James? I just told you. LeBron James and many of the African-American basketball players, like the Milwaukee Bucks player, by the way, who we just saw last year was tased and put on the ground because he was in an illegal parking spot in the middle of the night. The point I'm trying to make is it doesn't matter how much money you have. You know what matters? The color of their skin. Because they're black, they are capable of being a victim more than somebody like you or me, like Representative Scott. So the idea that just because they have money and they're famous does not mean this does not impact them, JD. I'm sorry. I just disagree with you, and the facts back up my opinions. Look at what happened to that Bucks player. Look at what happened to Congressman Scott. So anyway, there's a reason why we're talking about this.
I mean, I've been in a chokehold from police officers before, but guess what? I was in a place I shouldn't have been.
Okay.
I was in a place.
Okay.
I'm white.
Scott wasn't in a place he shouldn't have been.
I agree. I'm not saying it doesn't take place.
So do you agree with what I'm saying?
I'm sure it does happen.
So it can impact people. So we can agree on that.
I suppose, yes, it can impact people.
It has. It has.
But let's be honest. It's going to impact. I mean, as far as what happened to Jacob Blake, you're going to have to resist police, have an extended police record, or have an extended record, probably be committing a crime, and be armed.
Okay, I don't want to get into his police record right now.
You're conflating.
I didn't want to get into a dispute.
You're falsely equating.
No, I'm not.
Being pulled over or being followed X amount of times from being shot in the back while in the act of committing a crime.
Okay, I want to go into this hockey story, but you just said that you don't think that LeBron James could be impacted.
Any single person of any single race, if they were doing what Jacob Blake did, I mean, if I
we're not talking about Jacob Blake,
if I had a knife and a police officer tased me and I was fighting with him,
we're not talking about just what happened.
And
to Blake.
I got into my car, despite the fact he told me not to, and I reached down. And he thought that he couldn't stop me.
Okay,
I would not be surprised if I got shot.
I want to move on to this hockey story, but I will.
A knife is a deadly weapon.
I want to move on to this hockey story, but I will end by saying this: the whole point of BLM and the whole point of whether it's LeBron James or the comments that Republican Scott said is that blacks are treated differently than whites in some of these situations. It can affect anybody, whether you have $100 million in your bank account or whether you're a congressman like Congressman Scott. Scott admitted that. LeBron talks about it. NBA players talked about it, and that is the point we're trying to make. And you know what? I give the NHL credit now because I understand why the NBA did what they did yesterday. And now we are learning that the NHL, and this is breaking news, will not be playing any playoff games today in solidarity with other leagues protesting the recent police shooting of Jacob Blake, of course, in Wisconsin. So the decision actually affects the Vegas Golden Knights. So let me just finish reading.
The conversation is Jacob Blake. It's not Tim Scott being pulled over 10 times.
Let me finish reading the press release before we get into another argument. The decision puts off games between the New York Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers, as well as the Vegas Golden Knights and the Vancouver Canucks. Earlier Thursday, Hockey Diversity Alliance co-leader Evander Kane, who happens to be African-American. I know Vegas Golden Knights fans don't like him very much, but Evander Kane put out a formal request. He's the one who started this from the group for the NHL to suspend all playoff games on Thursday. He tweeted, "We strongly feel this sends a clear message that human rights take priority over sports." So I find that interesting. Evander Kane, I think that's cool that Evander Kane took the necessary steps to get this thing going. A black man in the NHL doing it. I think that's also cool. And make no mistake about it, this isn't just about Jacob Blake. I don't speak for the players, but I've read some of the players' comments. They are sick and tired of having to deal with these stories over and over and over again. It's not just Jacob Blake.
And it's not just African Americans, Brian.
What does that mean?
Police officers, officer-involved shootings, wrongdoing by police officers. It happens all the time.
So what are you saying?
To every race nationwide.
Why
So every time that something like this takes place, is this going to be the norm moving forward? Keep in mind, Brian, this guy was armed with a knife.
Here we go again.
He was armed. No, it's not. Here we go.
It's not
again.
just this
he
story.
He was armed with a. What I'm saying is, I mean, this is a pretty interesting story. I mean, this guy was armed with a knife. He was fighting. He was fighting with police. He is a sex offender. He had been tased. It didn't affect him.
That is completely irrelevant.
A knife is a deadly weapon. No.
What you're saying is completely irrelevant with him being a sex offender. That means nothing when it comes to this case.
I think this is an overreaction. Now, again, if Jacob Blake was
I know that you think BLM is an overreaction. You think George Floyd was an overreaction.
Let me finish, Brian. What I'm saying is situations like this with Jacob Blake could happen all over the place. I mean, this guy had a weapon. It's not like he was walking to work and was murdered by a police officer. That would be totally different.
Right. So everybody's overreacting.
No, yes.
Everybody's overreacting.
If this is going to be, if this will be the standard reaction every time something like this takes place, and it's creating this culture of hating all police officers or vilifying police officers, it's going to start taking place more and more and more.
All right,
and the
so
more and more it takes place, if this keeps happening, it's going to be a ridiculous pattern.
I find it interesting.
This is a
hold on.
complete
Let me respond.
overreaction to the circumstances.
Okay, let me
Brian.
respond to what you just said.
I mean,
I'm writing them down because I'm going to forget them because you keep going. So please let me respond to what I just said, please. I find it interesting that you find it very troubling and you talk about the culture of hating cops, but yet you refuse to admit or even acknowledge the culture of hate on minorities. So you brought that up, and I wanted to hold on, I'm not done yet now. I find that interesting, the culture of hating cops, but you never admit that there's a culture of mistreating minorities. Also, hold on, I'm not done yet. Also, because I'm going to forget, because you mentioned a couple other things. You mentioned about a pattern. Why is it that you never admit that there is a pattern of African Americans that are treated unfairly by police officers? Why don't you ever want to acknowledge that pattern?
Because I don't think there's rampant systemic racism on behalf of the police department, Brian. I don't think it. Attorney General Barr doesn't think it. Larry Elder doesn't think it.
Barr. That's a great.
Leo Terrell doesn't think it. Darren Porcher doesn't think it. A lot of people, a lot of prominent people outside of myself,
Barr
don't think that. Yeah, I understand you don't like Barr. That doesn't mean he's wrong, Brian.
Yeah. Barr really is a great spokesperson. He really cares about the minorities.
So now you're assuming that this Wisconsin police officer shot Jacob Blake because he's black.
Nope, didn't say that.
Actually, that's what you're implying,
nope,
Brian.
Didn't say that.
Okay.
You just don't understand when I talk about certain issues. Here's what I am saying. This isn't just about Blake. This is about the way minorities and systemic racism and the way the police brutality.
Systemic racism you're using that word wrong.
Okay,
it's not. You're not using it right.
You use a lot of words wrong because you don't think that systemic racism exists.
I don't. No.
Okay. Well, I think you're using that wrong.
That means that the laws are in place for the sole purpose of oppressing one race. That's what systemic racism is.
We got to go. I know you're very upset that the NHL canceled games today.
What I'm upset about is this massive overreaction to what was a armed criminal, most likely, who we have no reason. We have no reason to believe that this was race related whatsoever.
And as I say one more time, and I'll say it again,
if Jacob Blake was a white guy, there wouldn't be one African American.
He wasn't white.
But if he was,
stupid hypothetical. He's not white.
So the color of his skin is the only thing that matters here.
What I am saying is the reason why all these basketball players and NHL players are doing this because they all agree that something needs to be done. And there is something in this country called systemic racism.
No, there isn't, Brian.
Okay, well, fine. All the NHL players that are doing this, all the NBA players that are doing this, all the professional athletes disagree with you on that.
It is going to bite them in the ass.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. And once again, I completely disagree with you. I think that's idiotic. And I think 5-10 years from now, when we see what these players did and we see the change that is going to happen in this country, because I think it's coming, I think we will look back and say this was a good thing what these athletes did and not a bad thing.